Started. This is a nice turnout for a summer conference. Since we don't have these on a regular basis in the summer, so always a little nervous whether people are going to show up. But it's a nice audience, and I was telling our speakers we have like the whole array of students and trainees here from the bioinformatics, clinical informatics, etc. Anyway, so. We've fortunate enough today to bring in a couple speakers who are local to Portland, but actually working on a very national project for an organization that you've all heard of, Kaiser Permanente. And Kaiser, in many ways, has always been a forward-looking organization, early adopter of electronic health records, other technologies, and now embracing data analytics in a major way. So our speakers, Brian Sikora and Chris Guy, are here to tell us about what they're doing. And before they do that, I won't take up too much time, but I want to just introduce them a little. Brian has been with Kaiser since 2005. He started as an analyst, progressed his way through successive leadership roles, initially in the Northwest region, and extending to other regions of Kaiser. He's been a leader in Kaiser's analytics efforts and moving the process from a decentralized to a coordinated one that will provide value across the entire organization. He has a master's in healthcare administration from Portland State and a bachelor's of finance from University of Pittsburgh. He'll be speaking with Chris Guy, who's the executive director of the Analytic Information Management in the Decision Support Group at Kaiser, and they're responsible for the development, maintenance, and operation of these analytics systems. He's also played a number of leadership roles and is also now leading this project. Chris has a bachelor's degree in biology and chemistry from the University of Puget Sound, a master's in health administration from the University of Washington, and most importantly, a graduate certificate in biomedical informatics from Oregon Health and Science University. So we're very proud of him. And it shows you all the great things that our alumni go off and do. So anyways, I won't take any more of their time, and I will turn it over to them.
Excellent. Yeah, so it's so great to be back, by the way. Yeah. First of all, thank you for the time. I'd like to introduce Claudine Martin as well. Claudine is with our team. If you're interested, Claudine has worked with us for years and years and years. So if you want like the lowdown of what it's really like, you can talk to her. If you're interested in finding out more about opportunities, Claudine can also help you with that. So if there are, like I said, if there are questions like kind of like how we work at Kaiser and what it means, Claudine can certainly help with that as well. So I think Brian and I are going to do this a little bit of a tag team. They'll provide color. I'll kind of go through the slides. I think it'd probably be best for this to be pretty interactive. And so if you're interested, if you have a question about what we're talking about, like it doesn't make sense or you want more depth, just ask. Let's not wait till the end. So it's pretty contextual. I mean, like any large organization, we have it's like insider baseball. Like we have our own terms and concepts and things. So there are like that proverbial thing, there are no dumb questions. Like with Kaiser, it's like a language of its own almost. So there are no dumb questions. Please speak up. So does that sound good? Nodding? Okay. Go through this. So I wanted to just start with a little bit. Oh, wow, that's offset. Is there any way to get that all on? Ah. You want to go up? I was like, this? Yeah. There we go. Okay. So Kaiser Permanente, we're in the middle of a transformation around analytics. And yeah, I don't have anything down in that corner anyway. That's important.
Isn't that your logo?
The KP logo, yeah. We want you all as members. That's why we put it there, so it's being blocked out. Yeah, I like it. Kaiser Permanente, we're in the middle of a kind of an analytic transformation, and the program's called A2O, Analytics, the second edition. So how we got to the name. And I thought I would just start with a little bit with the abstract, and then kind of tell you what I think what I'd like to go over. This is what we call a large program. That means we had to go to the board because it's going to cost some money. We will be implementing a cloud-based analytic foundation that's part of what we call our systems of intelligence. So at Kaiser Permanente in our IT world, we have systems of record, systems of engagement, and systems of intelligence. And within each one of those areas, we have strategies associated with them. And this is one big piece of our systems of intelligence, not the only piece of our systems of intelligence strategy is this particular program. Cloud-based analytic digital foundation intended initially to support kind of our health plan, finance, and operational decision making. But with an eye towards kind of the future, perhaps, as well, in terms of like more clinical decision making. At Kaiser, there are all sorts of interests around clinical informatics, and so you have to be. So the focus of it right now is more around health plan, finance, and operations. When I talk about Kaiser as an organization, I think it'll become clear how big of a thing that is. So that's kind of an abstract of what the program is. So in terms of topics, I'd like to just a little bit talk about the mission and an overview and a little bit about our technology journey. This is a large program, and one of the key things about running a large program is making sure you have your North Star, like where you're headed. And so we have some guiding principles that we'd like to go over and talk a little bit about how we govern a large program and the decision makers who we're trying to impact. And then we have a framework for our analytics digital foundation that I'd like to go over, and then I have a couple slides about the architecture. I have to tell you that I'm not deep technical, right? So I have an IT counterpart, Ganesh, who helps me mightily when it gets into all of the technology. So if you ask me questions and they seem like I have dumb answers or no answer at all, that's why, especially when we get to the architecture. Some of it I know, but so we'll do this and we'll see how it goes without Ganesh. And then questions and discussion at the end. So sound like a good plan? Okay, a little bit about Kaiser Permanente. Our mission is to provide high quality, affordable health care and improve the health of our members. So Kaiser is I think of Kaiser as being a delivery system with a health plan, not the other way around. So we think of ourselves as a delivery system. We fund ourselves as a health plan. And that's different than a lot of other organizations in healthcare. That's kind of how we said. But the health plan piece of it is not a small piece. This is our revenue. This is how we actually get revenue into the organization. So it's really important to be good at it. But where we really want to be great at is providing high quality, efficient healthcare to our members. And that's really a distinction. I mean, over the years, Kaiser has become kind of known for its quality. I mean, we have regularly get 5 stars for Medicare's ratings. We regularly get consumer accolades in terms of our how consumers perceive Kaiser. And this is a change. I mean, it used to be in the 70s and 80s. Kaiser was not that. And so we've done an amazing job over the last 10 to 15 years improving quality. A lot of that is the result of our implementation of our electronic health record, what we call Health Connect. We are now going on the other piece of that mission, which is affordability. So this is a huge effort at Kaiser Permanente. We want to not only be the highest quality, but we also want to be the most affordable. We actually think that those two things should coincide with each other. So the affordability initiative, our CEO, Bernard Tyson, this is his #1 thing by far, is that we need to make sure that healthcare is accessible. And analytics plays a role in that in terms of helping us figuring out what is the most efficient and effective way of treating our members. So it all fits together. We have this concept of total health. One of the things I love about Kaiser is I kind of think of us as being the merging of public health and a delivery system, is that many of our concepts, because we are at risk, so we are financially at risk for our members, the best thing we want to do is keep people healthy, right? I mean, we do not have an interest in people being, a financial interest in being sick. Not that other healthcare systems don't, but we have an opportunity to actually serve a very defined population of our members. And it's really the intersection I think of as public health and delivery systems, and the use of information systems to support it is actually absolutely key, just like it is in public health, which is how do we serve our members? You know, how do we actually serve them most efficiently? Some facts about Kaiser. 1945, we're one of the nation's largest not-for-profit health plans. We have 12.2 million members. We're made up of 3 different organizations, a hospital organization, a health plan organization, and then, I'm going to get this wrong, 6 independent medical groups?
You got it right.
Did I get it right? Okay. And the reason I bring that up is that in doing a large program, there are all sorts of, in designing technology that is intended to meet the needs of different organizations, there's some things you need to be really, really careful about, and you really need to design well in terms of giving access, security and access to our information. I mean, we think of ourselves as Kaiser Permanente. The world thinks of us as Kaiser Permanente, but we're actually, in total, like 15 different organizations, more than that, actually.
Yeah, I think it's at least 24. Like, yeah, so you think about security model alone of a major project is like you have 213,000 employees, 22,000 physicians, 40 hospitals, and about 24 different legal entities. So you have to secure all that data in a way that meets all the legal restrictions that come with that. So it's a complex challenge.
It's a complex challenge. So the reason I bring that up there is that there are informatics implications of having an organization, certainly that's at this scale that I'm sure you all can get, but even with this level of complexity, I think for people outside, they don't really realize how complicated an organization we are as well.
I think one piece to think about from the analytic community perspective, we said we're part of this goal is like while we're going through this program as well as like we're trying to shift from a decentralized analyst organization to a coordinated analyst organization, which this data infrastructure that this program we're about to talk about is a critical component to making that happen. Right now we have analysts spread through all those 40 medical centers. We have analysts in different regions, and we have different programs have different analyst teams. I mean, there's a lot of overlap, redundancy, and gaps. We actually don't know how many analysts we have in our organization today. That's another project I'm working on right now, is coming up with the analyst job description, so we actually know how many analysts we have across Kaiser Permanente. The estimates are between 2,000 and 5,000, so we got to zero in on that. So just keep that organizational people transformation in mind as Chris talks about some of the aspects of the Analytics 2.0 program as well.
Yeah. At Kaiser Permanente, we're definitely on a technology journey, and this is kind of where we're going from a technology standpoint. We have one of the largest, you guys probably know this, implementations of an electronic health record in the world, probably maybe second to like the VA and British National Health System, but we have a very, very large implementation of an electronic health record around all of those regions and for those 12 million members. Over time, we've gone into online. We have pretty good engagement with our members on our portal, moving into e-visits and online tools. Again, these things are very associated with our mission of trying to become affordable as well as available to our members. So for an organization like Kaiser, e-visits, yes, we definitely want to do them. It's part of what being a member, part of the value of being a member. We've had some regulatory things that we've had to do, HIPAA, ICD-10, meaningful use, the whole ACA conundrum, which was a major regulatory reporting challenge that we actually had to go through. So we've gotten through some of that. We have new platforms for our claims. Our claim administration is now done inside of Epic. It used to be on a whole bunch of different systems. Lab, OneLink, which is our finance system, pharmacy revenue cycle. So we've gotten into more kind of vertical kind of applications, as well as kind of reinforcing kind of some of our infrastructure. Where we're going, and this is why I brought this slide up, is important for this project because it kind of fits in. Oh, and this is the one. This is where it would fit. It actually mattered. Can you imagine? Yeah. So we are coming at a wall of data is coming at Kaiser Permanente. So between the Internet of Things, genomics, I was at a meeting with Microsoft, and they told me that one person fully sequenced is 100 terabytes of genomic information. Multiply that by 12.2 million, and you got petabytes and petabytes and petabytes of data, devices. So there's this wall of data that is actually coming at us. And there is increasing need, desire, and member expectations that we use that information as part of our operations and part of our analytics. And so the two big pieces of this strategic priorities are a focus on actually managing data and analytics as well as going to the cloud. And this particular project, A2O, actually does both. We will be moving our one of our analytic platforms, the one that we're developing, to the MS Azure, Microsoft Azure cloud, kind of over the next 3 or 4 years. So this is kind of like where we're going. I said when I started that it's really important in a really large program to have North Stars, something that we can all align on in terms of trying to make decisions around how we do things and what we do. And these are the North Stars for our program, the things that we are trying to achieve. And it's good, and Brian, you kind of described it. Actually, I wanted to describe a little bit about where we are, because these probably don't make any sense unless you realize how kind of siloed and fractured our analytic infrastructure is currently at Kaiser Permanente. So we have 28 instances of Epic running. Yep. 28 instances of Epic running. We have 1,900 registered systems inside of Kaiser Permanente. So this is some system that is being managed and maintained to meet some needs. So 1,900 of them in total. And the analytics based on that, there's regional people doing analytics. There are functional people doing analytics. It is widely dispersed, distributed. In terms of how we've organized it?
Yeah, we use Cognos, we use SAS, we use R, we use SQL, we use business objects, we use Tableau.
It's no vendor left behind.
Our motto is no vendor left behind, but as when you think about that from self-service enablement and user experience, it's really not the best thing we could do for the people inside our organization. So,
and if you think about it, so we have an affordability initiative. We have a wall of data coming at us, and we have a highly distributed, fractured, siloed, I would go as far to say balkanized, which is a really strong word, analytic infrastructure and community. And so a big part of this project is the change management associated with actually going from here to there, right? And so that's why this is so important, is that we need the organization to agree on what we want it to look like when we get done. And so the purpose of the guiding principles is to try to provide that kind of vision of what we want it to be like when we're done. Some of these, this is a little bit like, the Scouts' Oath of Honor. I mean, who can disagree with standardization or reuse, right? But let me actually, so it's like you look at it, you kind of go, yeah, right. Well, not unless you understand the perspective of what it's like to be inside the organization. So let me just go through these a little bit and provide you some maybe vignettes about some of the challenges that we have related to the guiding principles. So self-service enablement. And obviously, we want to make sure that everybody operates at what we call the top of their license. What that means is this self-service isn't just about providing our decision makers with ability to do their analytics. That's part of it. But it's also making sure that everyone can actually be part of self-service. That wall of data is not, it's coming at us, is not going, the only way we're going to solve that is if actually people have their tools and operate at the top of their license. One of the challenges at Kaiser, and I suspect it's true at other organizations, is that we have an IT group and we have an analytics group. And the IT groups and the analytics groups, sometimes they really don't get along all that well. And this is part of making sure that our IT teams and our analytic teams who are actually using the data figure out how to work together. Part of this is actually enabling the analysts, the data scientists that we want to actually be using the technology. Flexibility, I don't think there's the biggest one. So in this project, our executive sponsors are the CFO of our organization, Kathy Lancaster, and she has a total passion about standardization from the seat that she sits in. So we in the analytic community, we fail when the source of variation is methodology and not performance, right? And at an organization like Kaiser, I mean, how many different ways can you measure a patient day? How many different ways can you measure pneumonia? How many different ways can you measure, you name it? I mean, the events that we want to measure, we need to standardize on them. We need to come up as best we can with standards that are linear. Sometimes that doesn't work, that go from, you know, the point of care all the way to the boardroom. Sometimes that's very difficult to do. But the organization, to be able to make sure that we're meeting our objectives, needs to have standardization. There have been lots of situations where our executives have had information coming from different analytic groups that say completely different things. It's like the Tin Man and the Wizard of Oz. Which way are you going? We lose face. We lose credibility with our executives when we don't standardize on how we define things, as well as just the experience. So a big portion of this project is actually establishing with this large community what we expect standards and best practices to be. Because we can't get to that point without actually having people commit to using things. Things like tools, right? Which is, there's no economy to having every BI suite in the world implemented. There's just no value to it. I mean, they're good ones, they're bad ones. From my perspective, they're mostly do a lot of the same thing. Any one of them can work. So, speed to insight. So this is the amount of time that it takes between having data and actually finding insight and making action. There are a huge, with the amount of data that we have, there's just a processing issue with this. One of the beauties of the cloud is that it's massively parallel. It's very elastic and can scale quickly to meet new demands. Many of our systems inside of Kaiser Permanente, our analytics systems, run at 20 to 25% utilization in terms of looking at CPU, memory, disk, any of it. Analytics systems, by their nature, are very batchy. You know, we run a model that we run at the end of the day, end of the week, end of the month, end of the year. Unlike systems of record, which have relatively more normal kinds of utilization patterns. So one of the speed to insights is actually going to the cloud, which is we can scale up and scale down to meet the needs and spend a lot less money spinning cycles on infrastructure that doesn't get used.
Yeah, I think a good example of improvement here is, like, especially in the month end, like days 1 through 5 of the next month, we have some jobs that process, they take 2 to 3 days to finish, and if it fails, you got to start 2 to 3 days again. So it's like speed to insight. Like, this is I'm very excited to remove that barrier from our processes, and it will allow us to become much more nimble on even not just new work, but even just routine tasks that have challenges and hiccups every now and then, like everything does.
User experience, so it needs to be compelling and consistent. From a methodology standpoint, being agile in terms of actually how we develop solutions. So we will be using, some of you maybe know about Agile and the Agile methodology as a software development lifecycle. This program will use Agile. It's a little new to us, but the idea of Agile methodologies is that instead of having the massive plan, which by the time you get done with the plan is an end in itself, not a means to an end. With Agile, you set kind of high expectations for how you're going to achieve the end point, and you just get down to the work, and you try to do it much more agilely. So we will be using Agile as our methodology. I mean, I think the biggest one one that probably has the most value to the organization is reusability. So at Kaiser Permanente, we have a chief data officer that we work very closely with. And they did this interesting study at Kaiser where they looked at the total amount of data that we have, and then they looked at the amount of data that we have in our systems of record. And what they found is it was 10 to 1. So on average, we're making 10 copies of system of record data. And there are reasons why why that is always going to be a number greater than 1. But 10 is ridiculous at our scale. The chief data officer actually called me and said, "Chris, I can't believe this number." And I was like, well, actually, I have 4 copies of them myself.
And I have 2.
You have 2? Yeah. A big portion of this project is about developing a framework that allows us to lay down the data once in one place, bring it all together across all those regions and entities, and enable people to reuse it, to extend it. So a lot of the framework we're going to be talking about is how do we get analytic teams to, instead of making yet another copy of the data, actually just extend what we have. Let's put it all together. This will free up, we think it will free up a tremendous number of resources and capacity so that we can actually start working on all of the other data that we actually haven't really had the time to do because we're managing 10 copies of it. Quality enablement, I mentioned we have a chief data office at Kaiser. They're responsible for data quality. This is the folks in analytics, we have a huge responsibility in data quality because sometimes we're the only ones who see them. Especially consistency and issues of consistency. So 20 some odd instances of Epic. You can imagine how many encounter types we have, how many visit types we have across all that. And many of them mean exactly the same thing. So there's a huge mastering problem. Yeah?
You want us to be interactive, so can I ask you a question? Have you, are the 20 versions of Epic, 20 instances of Epic similar? I mean, in terms of their data dictionaries and other kinds of things, or not?
So,
and if not, why not?
It's someplace between here and there. Okay, so we had, as part of the implementation of Epic, we had national build. And many of the applications, there was an intent to try to implement them nationally. And in some areas, they're more consistent. And, but in other areas, they're very inconsistent.
I think a lot of the early on, there was more inconsistency than there is today. Like some of the more recent builds are more similar than different, but the earlier ones were more different than similar. Was a good way to put it.
Just because I know nationally, Epic is encouraging people to go back to their foundational system for interoperability and other kinds of reasons.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that the places where we find the data to be the most similar is when there's an external administrative need for it to be similar, which is disappointing. Revenue is an amazingly powerful thing to get actual consistency in data definition. There is one of the things about bringing the data together is that it's easier to find where there are variations. And I've had people inside of Kaiser say, well, you can't bring all this data together. It's all different. I'm like, it's all different anyway. Yes. Well, first of all, yes, we can do it. Yep. The issue is making sure that people recognize that there can be variations from instance to instance. But if you actually want to find those variations, you actually have to bring it together. It's the easiest way to find it. So, yep, we're going to go. Okay. Yep. Decision makers. So Kaiser Permanente, we have a lot of, everybody in an organization is a decision maker. We all need to become analysts. The idea that we'll have this analyst class who answers people's questions is a fallacy. Everybody needs to be an analyst at some level. We will still always have professional analysts, but the intent is that we, through self-service, distribute analytics and that we grow a culture that is always looking at the data to figure out what the evidence says and what we can discover. At Kaiser Permanente, we have this kind of window pane where we look at our decision makers. We put them on 2 dimensions. So our members, patients, and groups. So the groups that we sell our product to, kind of point of care, service and sales, and our leadership. And this, although it doesn't show up really great here, The intent of this project is to serve mostly our leaders as well as our sales and group management. What that means is that the actual analytics that are at the point of care and clinical analytics needs to be embedded in workflow. It needs to be part of the implementation. We do believe that by bringing all of our data together, we can actually develop better models using the power of all of Kaiser's data, and that they probably will be able to be used as models. I always think of models as like, give me the coefficients, right? So we believe that the models could be deployed, that we could be useful for point of care, but the direct point of care will continue to come from within our systems of record, mostly Health Connect. So the intent of this is more kind of executives, functional leaders, local leaders, and our sales account management and groups. You would be surprised how interested, especially the kind of sales and group people, are about clinical and clinical effectiveness and measures that are more clinical in nature. So, in running a large program, it's really important to get your governance straight. These are the people who are going to stand behind you when the going gets tough. And in a project like this, there will be lots of political and resistance, and we have 220,000 people who may have some interest in this that we need. So this is how we've organized our program. We have executive sponsors. This is our CIO and our CFO, as well as the leaders for quality and finance from our medical group. So super important for us to weave our medical group partners into all of this. So we have medical group partners who are kind of within the whole program. We have a steering committee and a community of practice. So our community of practice, I told you about how important the standards are. Our community of practice is where we go to align on standards. Oftentimes with standards, it's somebody's going to have to give something up, right? Negotiation happens when everybody is willing to give something up. And so we have to bring together our community of practice, the people, and try to get them to agree on the value of having standards, because somebody's going to give something up, probably. The actual delivery, of the value, so you put together a business case for a large program, you have to identify where you're going to bring value. And it's monetized. I mean, we have a net present value. It's finance that we had to take to our board to actually get it approved. And this is the piece that actually delivers on the program, actually does the work. So it's typically broken up into tracks. In this case, the tracks are kind of going this way. We'll talk about the framework and the foundational data and services that are going to support all of these different use cases for it. It's all wrapped together by a program management office. So the people who actually help us make sure that we're doing the right things and in the right sequence. All right, that's kind of all of the high-level program, kind of what the program's about and how we're organizing it, piece of it. But from a technology standpoint, you need to have a framework to think about how you're going to do this. And this is the framework that we have. We're actually up meeting with Microsoft, and we actually shared, as a partner, we shared with them, we asked, like we're a big organization, super complicated. We want to move all of our analytic data. Like, how do you do it? What have you guys learned? And they brought up a framework that looked almost exactly like this. And I went, well, at least we're not going to mess up this program because we didn't get the framework right. We might mess it up for a whole lot of other reasons, but it's not because the actual way to think about the problem is not correct, right? So the framework is based, I hate hierarchies. I don't know about you guys, but I was a biology major, right? Like cells. I actually like cells better because it's a better way of thinking of it. But I tell you what, in organizations, people like hierarchies. I don't know why. These things don't, whenever I look at this, I always go, but they all work together, right? They intend to work together. So the platform that, and the framework that we have is that we have this analytics digital foundation that is made up of foundational services and foundational data. This is the shared part of the environment, right? So we intend to have a variety of different tenants that are represented by these cute buildings on the top, reusing data for meeting different decision-making needs. So that is, in a nutshell, what the model is, which is we have a shared foundation, have different tenants who deliver value to decision makers, and they build off of a common foundation. In this model, the tenant is where the value is. There's no reason to have all this gobbledygook if we do not have well-defined decision-making communities and problems to solve. We envision that as part of this program, we could have hundreds of different tenants who are reusing data for different decision-making communities. So they could be functional, revenue management, or risk adjustment, or claims administration. They could be regional. They could be project-oriented. We have a lot. As a large organization, I mean, healthcare is highly, highly regulated. And we oftentimes have regulations that we have to respond to, and oftentimes very quickly. And they always require some kind of reporting requirement. So we envision tenants being able to be developed quite quickly. The foundation services is made up of kind of foundational data management services. These are things like data quality and metadata, and the stuff that you talked about, actually having data catalogs that actually allow us to discover what data we have and what it means, what the lineage of it is, you know. Kind of platform and infrastructure services. So these are the things like we need an ingestion framework. We need a way that we can ingest from a multitude of different systems real-time and batch data from our systems of record and external sources. So it's an example of a platform service. And then the analytic services, the things that everybody gets real excited about, you know, the business intelligence layers, the artificial intelligence, kind of advanced analytics. Some of this stuff has evolved so much. Sometimes people know it. I know that I actually know what some of these things are, and it's just become a maze of analytic services. Some of it is very, very cool. There are just an immense number of them. From a data standpoint, there will be 3 kind of zones within the foundation. We will ingest raw data. So I have a colleague who has this great saying that I love. He says, data is like fruit. The more you touch it, the worse it gets. And this is actually, I think about this like lossy. You guys know about like MPEG and JPEG, lossy, right? All you can do, if you capture information about an event, all you can do with the data is make it worse, right? It's just like, you know, on Facebook, I post pictures, they screw it up. You know, it's so lossy, or MPEG, it's so lossy. Same thing here. Do no harm, right? Just bring, so we have 20-some-odd instances of Epic, right? I have 1,900 systems. We want much of the data from all of those to be on. Just bring it in. Put it in some place, catalog it, but don't touch it, right? Don't start manipulating it. When you do that, we will do that, but don't do that initially. Do it once you get it. And this is a big change for Kaiser. It's a big change for how many analytic systems have been designed. And it's part of the concept of a data lake, which is kind of the Hadoop way of thinking of it. Once we have all this raw data, there will be a zone where we refine it. This is the process of curating data, so it's useful for decision making. And a good example of refinement of data is we have all these different instances of Epic. We will put all of the data together, put a region code on it. Our data is organized by region in the system of record, and conform it. So we will find a common model, and we'll put it in a common model. That brings value by just ease of use. It's being easier to find the data if it's all actually brought together. At the top of this, we have this concept of shared enrichments and rules. It's actually a really good analytic article in Harvard Business Review from like a year or so ago that talked about a single source of truth, multiple versions of truth. And the concept is that you can have all of this data, but there are oftentimes different reasons why you want to process it in different ways. You could have different regulatory definitions. You could have a whole bunch of different reasons that you want to actually process it differently. And so by having all of your data in one place and having this enrichment layer where the rules are clearly identified, and distinctly put on your framework, you can actually understand the lineage and provenance of analytics, just like you understand the lineage and provenance of systems of record data. So, all right, that's the framework.
This is my favorite slide coming up.
Is it?
Yeah.
Everybody loves this one.
I just love looking at all the boxes.
So this is great. So this is like, okay, this is like really embarrassing, right? So somebody said, well, like, what's in that? I don't get it. So like about half of my job is actually trying to translate informatics to executives, right? And they're well-intentioned, but I'll tell you what, they're demanding. They're super demanding. You know some of the people I'm talking about. They're like, tell me, give me examples. I don't get it. So I sat down one night and actually just started typing at 6-point font. That's how we ended up with this. This is in no way expended to be all of it. But this is some examples of the kinds of information that we will have in these different levels and what we will actually do with it.
What I like about this slide is you look at the categories of data and how it's organized from our systems out to the healthcare domains and actually up to the dimensional models or the enrichments that we can apply to it. Is like you think about like organizing this once and then being able to use it by the analytic community up in that tenant level. Like what a transformation this will be from where we are today, where every analytic project we have, where 90% of the effort is obtaining access to the data, structuring the data, getting it ready for use, is like this will do that for us, and it's going to completely change like where we are today and where we'll be from 3 years from now. From like what an analyst does inside our organization will be completely different because of this structure. And that's like, so I love thinking about all the different pieces you can piece together and like what we're going to be able to do with it.
I'm glad it did that.
No, it's fantastic. I love
awesome.
it.
Yeah. One of the common challenges at Kaiser is that we don't is a rationalization problem, which is everybody like segmentation, member segmentation. So we have a lot of people who want to look at our business by different segments, whether it's by the product that they purchased, the line of business, what region they came from. And what we find is that there are a whole bunch of people who do this independently. And part of this model is that concept of shared enrichments and rules is we need to find one person to do it. And we all need to agree to it and live with it, right? Because right now, part of the reason we end up with different answers for our executives is because it's not intent, or it's not intent, it's that we're not organized right. So part of the standards and best practices is actually coming to agreement on who's responsible for what in our analytic environment. So anyway, that's eye candy, like super big eye candy. We actually have an even bigger one. Let me get it for you. It's like wall size because we're actually starting to get into more levels of detail. Let me talk a little bit about where we think the kind of current state and future state and why we're doing it. And Brian, you brought up actually a really good point. That is, there was some great work studies done looking at what data scientists actually spend their time doing. And what they discovered is that data scientists spend about 70% of their time doing what we call data wrangling, and about 25% of their time actually trying to find insight. So what is data wrangling? Data wrangling is getting access to the data, right? I mean, before you can do anything, you actually have to have your TNS names or however you're going to connect. You got to get that baby set up so you can get access to the data. There are situations at Kaiser Permanente where it will take 2 to 3 months to get access to data, right? That's got to go away. It's got to go away. Data wrangling is data quality. It's bringing it together. It's putting it on one platform. It's trying to figure out how to provision the resources to do it. So 25/75, we want to flip that. We want data scientists. They're really expensive. And the work they do is cool. I can't believe that they're not frustrated sitting there trying to figure out how to wrangle all this data together.
They are.
They are totally frustrated doing this, right? So we're going to flip this on its head. We're going to say, we want you to spend 75% of your time actually doing what you love to do and where we get the most value, which is actually analyzing the data. 25% doing that. This is kind of before and after. I talked about that top one, which is the amount of utilization. We want to move to a way higher utilization of our resources. We want to have analysts spending their time, not doing data prep as much. We will move from the kind of ETL, where we come up with these elaborate models, data models, and then we torture our data to fit in some data model. That's not how data lakes work. It's an ELT model where you essentially just take the data as it is, bring it into a data lake, and part of that shared enrichment layer is actually developing schemas to represent the data in different ways. We see a huge opportunity to be using and leveraging the community beyond Kaiser, perhaps, to actually find insights. There are common data models that run around that people have come up with, like OMOP and Coronet and others like that, where if we can form our data to look like how others look like it, we can actually leverage other people's code and insights to see if it applies to Kaiser. The transformation from a traditional data warehouse to a kind of next generation data warehouse, the data lake, we think it will provide huge opportunities to use the kind of the larger community's knowledge. We talked about silos to a managed data platform. One of the other big challenges is a tool challenge at Kaiser. I think this is probably true at many organizations. We're using a lot of proprietary software. We hope as part of this to move beyond that, to be using as much open source as we can. A lot of times it's because the data scientists and the people that we're trying to work with, this is actually what they're being trained in. This is a huge change management issue, because we have people who have immense knowledge of our data who understand legacy tools. So you have to be very careful about that. The actual knowledge those people have about the data is super important. And I used to be a contender. I used to actually be able to write code. I don't do it anymore. but learning a new language is not easy. And so we need to be very careful about the transformation. But the idea is that we're trying to move to where the market of talent is going, which is to open source.
Yeah, that's a very big change for us. We've been spend a lot of time up here over the years, and I think, as like some of you guys know, is like we've been very heavy SAS, Cognos, Informatica over those years, and through the interactions, graduates from this program coming and to us saying, we don't know SAS, we use R, and then we get more and more people saying, we want to use R, and I was like, okay, so we're going on that public, like our CFO saying we're going to leverage open source tools. It's a major shift for our organization. I think it's the right shift to do, but it's like Chris was right. It's like the change management we have in front of us is it's culture change. This is a significant piece of culture change for our organization to make this transformation.
From an infrastructure standpoint, moving to the cloud, going horizontal in terms of vertical, being able to spin up resources when you need them. And just the ability to provision. So this is a kind of a crazy thing. So at Kaiser, if we need to get new capacity inside of our existing data centers, it's probably 9 months to a year if you can get them to put it in there at all. So if you have a new need, just the amount of time it takes you to actually get the computing power you need to do your work, it's like a year. That's got to go. We spend immense amounts of time going from one version of Oracle to the next version of Oracle. I'm done with that. I do not care. It adds absolutely zero value. Nobody cares at the end. Microsoft does it in the middle of the night. They make an update. Awesome. I do not have to worry about another Oracle upgrade. Honestly, we spend millions of dollars moving from one version of it to another version of it. There's no value to our members. None of doing that. So having it be, this is what's called platform as a service. So Microsoft provides the infrastructure. They provide the data centers out there in the gorge, many of them. They provide the tools. We build on top of it. We get out of the business of actually having to manage that infrastructure, and I'm glad to get out of it. There is an implication, but there are people inside of your IT organization where that's their job. And this becomes in terms of the change management, that becomes very, very challenging discussions. Talk about the economies. At the end of the day, it's an economy. It's going to happen. The issue isn't if, it's just when. Okay, next slide. Oh my. Okay, this is where I need Ganesh. So this is how the foundation is intended to work. Actually, this one I kind of know. It's the next one where I just whatever. You guys tell me what it is. So We capture data in our systems of record. We will have both batch and someplace on here, a real-time way of ingesting it in. We will create this data lake. This is that single source of truth. This is Hadoop. It's HDFS. It's the Microsoft version of Hadoop. So it's a massively parallel file system is where the data will land. In the process of moving that in, we catalog it, we profile it, and we tag it. Some important things that happen in those stages. So Brian talked about the importance of securing this information. You have to tag it to be able to secure it. And so the tagging of data elements so that you know what to secure is a really important thing to do. From there, we organize it kind of for tenant consumption. We create these refinements. Data is more commonly becoming like a service. So data as a service is where we're going, which is we expect different groups to expose their data to other people on the platform and to manage it. So I'll give you an example. At Kaiser Permanente, we do a lot of risk adjustment. Risk adjustment is the process by which we give every member at a point in time a score that measures their risk relative to others. We're required for regulatory reporting. We use it for helping to stratify our members and patients, for making sure we get them in the right categories and a whole bunch of other stuff. That is a service, right? What the community wants is one person to do risk adjustment and expose it to the community. This is an enrichment. So a definition of an enrichment is we're creating new data. In the case of risk adjustment, we're creating that score. So there are a whole bunch of models like that. I mean, luckily, some of these models run natively in different languages and in different scenarios and different tools and software. The hope here is that we can expose them in a common way so that they can be reused. So we don't have multiple people doing risk adjustment, for example. All of this goes into this kind of tenant area where we build our analytic assets. So we draw from that shared enriched data. And we develop the reporting. At the end of this is this concept of what we call data access objects and user access objects. This is how we actually are planning to actually secure the data. So role-based security, the whole concept of role-based security works really well in systems of record where you have a defined workflow and you can put people in roles. It does not work as well for analytics. I mean, analysts tend to want data. And the more data they can get, the better, right? Especially the data scientists. And so there's we're proposing a model, I think is actually kind of novel, which is exciting and scary at the same time, I think, which is to actually say that for analytic world, your access to data, what data you have access to find your role, as opposed to the function that you perform within it. So we will be organizing our data based on use, so that we can then assign people access to areas of use based on it. So, and then at the end of it, it goes who it all goes to, the decision makers.
Here's your test.
I'm not even going to try this one. Ganesh, please.
That's it.
Okay, good. We got done. Questions? I went so fast, or we went so fast. Nobody. Yeah.
Thanks for this inspiring talk. Sounds like you have some very innovative things that are happening there. I was just curious, is there a particular approach that you have to textual data?
From what standpoint?
Like note text, for example. The classic assumption is that the data that's contained in free text is not really usable. I was just wondering if there's like a strategy that you have, either like using like epics like smart elements or like NLP in some flavor to leverage that.
So we do some of that right now. I mean, because this is initially focused mostly on finance, operational, health plan kind of data, most of the data that's been codified is kind of the target. But we have used quite successfully natural language processing to help actually validate some of the coding that we do. We actually have in Southern California, Southern California has been a kind of a region, has been kind of a pioneer in actually reading clinical notes and helping it to either validate the diagnosis or the clinical term. It's kind of complicated to do. You have, sensitivity, specificity errors, statistical errors that you need to really be careful about, especially if you're using it for any kind of care decision making around care. But it's really good at actually identifying things to look at. So in terms of improving the quality of your classified data, it's really good for that. But you have to be careful about using it at the point of care because of those statistical errors. But I'm almost positive that Microsoft, if you go to the Azure webpage, so when we decided to use Azure, I'm enough of a goober that I decided to do this, which is, we said, oh, we're going to use Azure. I was like, wow, I wonder what that's like. I went out, provisioned myself an account. I got a SQL server and implementation of R and Power BI. I loaded a bunch of data onto it, created a little application because just wanted to see how easy it was to do. It's remarkably easy, which is cool. What's really interesting is when you go to the Microsoft site, and AWS or Google, it's the same thing, is how many services that they can provision on the cloud. It's insane in terms of the software. So there is natural language. There are probably 4 or 5 services that will help you with natural language processing, and I'm pretty sure Microsoft has one that's inherent to it.
So I was curious about your timeline, and I know you mentioned about 3 years, but could you give us a sense of the chunks of the project and how long it takes to do each part of that chunk?
Sure. So as part of Kaiser Permanente, we've implemented like tons and tons and tons of systems. We have 1,900 of them. So and big ones as well. And we have a little bit of a discipline around programs. And one of the things that we have learned is that programs can't take too long. If it takes too long, it doesn't get done. And so when we proposed this program, we actually proposed it much longer, and our CFO and CIO came in and said, nah, we're doing this in 3 or 4 years. You got to get it done in 3 or 4 years. Part of it is the organization just kind of loses interest, which is really weird to think, but I'm being honest. It's like, so doing this in 3 or 4 years is a stretch, especially given the components. When I shared the foundation, if you were doing this rationally, you would build from the bottom up, right? You develop your foundational services, you bring foundational data in, but because the organizations, and this is not just Kaiser's awesome. This is any organization. People will lose interest. You have to deliver value along the way. Otherwise, people will be like, your executives like, what are those guys doing anyway? We will be delivering some value along the way. The first couple of years of it is really laying down those foundational services and the foundational data that many people will use. But we are doing some things on an interim basis to keep our executives happy along the way. So the first portion of the program is really mostly about developing that foundation, and then the last part of the program is having our tenants, or the people who deliver value, actually use it. So when the business case was approved, everybody celebrated, and I went for a long walk and thought, oh my God, now we actually have to do it. When I thought about the problem of actually having to do this, I thought, well, we have to go parallel. We actually can't do this serial. There's too much work to be done in parallel. And so the approach that we're going to actually take, and we will see if this works, is to actually run this like any other software company would run this, right? Which is essentially the foundational services and foundational data need to be opened up and documented. And we need to let our analytic community and developers develop on it. So we are actually developing what we're going to call a tenant development toolkit, which tells them about the standards and the services that are available. We're going to develop a reference implementation. Another part of toolkits that's quite useful if you want to develop, which is how do you actually do it. And we are hoping to have most of our tenants, which are going to be doing the development of those shared enrichments and the reporting and all of the models, go parallel. So I think that that's the right way to do it. Instead of going, if it goes serial, it'll never get, I don't think it can get done in 3 or 4 years. So that's our hope.
So I had a question about that, the middle layer of the foundation data, which I think is fantastic, this idea of the refined level of data. And I know for the work that I do, that, I mean, you were talking about flipping that model of 20 versus 75 or 25 versus 75. That's potentially huge. So my question is, and I also really like that you're keeping the provenance information, which I think is really valuable. How are you going to ensure the validity of the processes that take the data from that raw stage to this harmonized stage and doing that mapping? And also, are you going to make the raw data available to people who are using it?
That is actually the question that you are insightful. Let me take the second one first. People have asked that. Here's the challenge. The challenge with Hadoop and file systems is they're really hard to secure. I mean, this isn't that you can't do it. Here's the challenge with IT. The challenge with IT is they can do anything you want them to do. The issue is the level of effort. What does it take to do it, not whether they. So somebody in this room will probably say, yeah, you can secure it, and I will challenge you as whether at this scale you can do it. Right now, our model or our assumption is that we will not allow access to raw data, mostly because it's hard to secure. And that's super important with all those organizations and entities. But we will move everything from raw to refined. So your second question, how do you ensure the validity of those models? Part of it is so we have a team, Claudine knows this very well, that will be responsible for making sure that as data moves, it's the lossy thing, right? You don't want to lose fidelity in the data as it moves from stage to stage. So you'll be using tools to actually validate data quality as it moves from these different layers. There's actually, this is really interesting to me because everybody's like so fascinated with AI, and so am I, kind of. I'm a little scared by it as well. Fascinated and scared at the same time. But there is actually data quality AI, and I think that's actually a phenomenal use of data, of AI, is to actually look at data quality. It seems to me you should be able to go multidimensional and find when you start to see cell sizes that are unlike other cell sizes based on different dimensions of data, it's probably a data quality problem. So one of the tools we're actually looking at is actually AI applied to data quality. So.
Can I talk to you about that later because that sounds awesome?
Yeah.
No one else wants to hear it, I don't think.
Yeah. Actually, data quality, yeah.
Well,
we're over. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, but quick question.
You mentioned that there was a lot of different, or like was 3,000 analysts in your system, and as they're becoming more of attendants in this case, were you having a plan to have them talk to each other? So, for example, if they're doing similar work on something, they can share their work?
Yep. Yeah, part of this is part of this platform will include a series of what we're calling the knowledge management tools, and I actually think we'll end up with an analytic librarian role at some point. We're going to have a standard. We're using the Atlassian product suite, so Jira for request and demand management, Bitbucket for code repository, and Confluence for project artifacts, analytic documentation, Q&A forms, and like best practice libraries. Through that, I think through the Bitbucket, Confluence, and maybe even I'd love to see like HipChat be used as well as like integrated in with that. I think that set of tools to enable the analysts to communicate with one another and connect them as a community, coupled with this with the single data environment, I think will achieve that vision.
Great, thanks. I know we could probably go on. Since Brian and Chris are local, they're around. They actually participate in our hybrid course that Shannon also leads.
And Ted.
And Ted. And also Virginia is learning more and more about their needs, so can give you advice if you're thinking that you might want to pursue this, and they actually have hired other graduates of ours. So I just want to thank them, and thank you for a great talk.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And we are trying to hire, so if you want to be part of this program, she's the woman to talk to before she leaves here.